The slow drip of 32-bit games hitting the PlayStation 5 continues this week with the release of 3 more classic titles. Look for Alone in the Dark, the new nightmare to spook survival horror fans, MediEvil to make them laugh, and Rebel Assault 2, the Hidden Empire to send Star Wars junkies into a galaxy far, far away. Yeah, that's exciting news, but are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Computer and Video Games, Next Generation, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. It's time to put on a brave face, everybody, because this is going to be a very scary episode of PlayStation Plus Review Crew. This year we got a brand new reboot of the classic horror game Alone in the Dark, and it was met with so-so reviews. Of course, longtime fans know that this is not the first time the series has been rebooted with mixed results. No, I'm not talking about that 2008 game published by Atari, but rather Alone in the Dark, the new nightmare on PlayStation. Developed by Darkworks and set in 2001, this game hits the reset button and sends Edward Carnby to a place that he's never been before. Present day! Beyond that, we got a survival horror story that felt like it was directly inspired by the more successful Resident Evil, complete with 2 different stories that have you playing as either Edward or Lean. At long last, this was Alone in the Dark's time to come out of the shadows and really shine. But, is that what happened? When it comes to the reviews, the critics were all over the place with the new nightmare. Electronic Gaming Monthly's average score was a 5.7 out of 10, but that doesn't really tell the full story, as the scores ranged from a 3.5 all the way up to a 7.5. Let's start with the more positive of the two. It's funny how Capcom took the best bits of Alone in the Dark and improved upon them to create Resident Evil, considering Infogrames is now doing the same in reverse. The control, if a tad sluggish, is up to what you'd expect from this type of game. The flashlight feature works nicely, throwing shapes all around the lush pre-rendered backgrounds, creating a suspense-filled atmosphere with enough surprises to make me jump on more than one occasion. On the flip side, Craig complained that it's little more than a bastardized Resident Evil ripoff. It's more like a gothic Easter egg hunt than a mystery. Don't come here to get your blood pumping. The zombie bust in action is pedestrian at best, and the dark graphics, well, they're just dark, not very scary. It seems like the only thing the designers got right was the game's subtitle. It was often a nightmare to play. Believe it or not, this is actually the lowest magazine score for the PlayStation version of the new Nightmare, as the rest of the critics were a lot more open to the changes. For example, the reboot received a solid 7 out of 10 from Edge in their 99th issue, and an 8 out of 10 from Game Informer in their 100th. This was pretty much the sweet spot for the game, as the official US PlayStation magazine also went with a 4 out of 5, and PSM went with the equivalent 8 out of 10. They concluded that it may not be completely perfect or have the best graphics ever, but the latest Alone in the Dark definitely reminds me why I love this genre so much. The puzzles are well thought out, and the voice acting is actually even quite decent. If you're a fan of the Resident Evil series, then this game is definitely a must-have. It's not too terribly innovative, but it does do an amazing job of keeping you on the edge of your seat. And if that isn't a sign of a great survival horror game, I don't know what is. Now, if you're looking for the highest score, then, well, you know where to go. GamePro. Giving it a 4.5 out of 5, Jake the Snake noted that the pace is slower than that of Resident Evil, and the monsters are not as prevalent. But that makes it all the scarier when a demon finally pops up. Ominous music and constant thunder keeps you edgy, but nothing is as creepy as the surroundings. The pre-rendered scenery would be stunningly beautiful if it wasn't so damn creepy. It's some of the best scenery on the PlayStation. If you're a Resident Evil fan with no monsters left to kill, don't be lonesome. Get Alone in the Dark, the new nightmare. The truth is, the critics were all over the place when it came to this reboot, which is basically true of all the Alone in the Dark games. I don't know why, but this is an extremely polarizing series, and now it's your chance to see which side of the divide that you land on. If you were a console gamer in the 1990s, then you might remember Rebel Assault as that Star Wars game that looked amazing in magazines, but got terrible reviews by the critics. By employing full-motion video and location straight out of the movies, the 1993 original foreshadowed the future of Star Wars video games, even if it wasn't all that much fun to play. But that's just the first game. Surely, a sequel would benefit from the more advanced hardware and developers that have more experience making this style of on-rails shooter. I mean, the PlayStation version was made by Factor 5, who had already made a name for themselves with the Turrican franchise, and would later go on to make some of the best Star Wars games ever. So I mean, Rebel Assault 2 is in good hands, right? What could possibly go wrong? Now, if you were a subscriber at GamePro in 1997, then you were probably still really excited to play Rebel Assault 2: The Hidden Empire. Although the coverage was reduced to a third of the page, they still managed to give the game an impressive 4.5 out of 5. The sharp, exciting graphics include long, well-done cinemas and rendered ships. The shooting levels are movie-quality clean. The sound is rich with symphonic scores sampled from the trilogy. Although the gameplay isn't as deep as Shadow of the Empire, it's still fast-shooting fun with a Star Wars twist. Rebel will keep you happy for a solid weekend. Now, in case you haven't figured it out yet, GamePro was the outlier when it came to Rebel Assault 2. Compare their take to Electronic Gaming Monthly, where Dan gave the game the same 4.5, which sounds fine until you realize that it's a 10-point scale. At its heart, the game is complete nonsense. You run or fly through full-motion video sequences or pre-rendered backgrounds shooting at objects that are not part of the scenery. Yawn. The other areas involve maneuvering your craft through various obstacles. Snore. To make matters worse, the control of these crafts is worthless. Fake Ninja Sushi X liked the game a little bit more, giving it a 6, but still argued that you probably shouldn't buy it. This game gets my Rental Award of the Month. I'd like to know how unskilled LucasArts thinks we gamers are. The first time I sat down with Rebel Assault 2, I beat it. This is a problem. I love the cutscenes, and it's a must-play for anybody who loves the movies, but you'll only need to play it once or twice. Electronic Gaming Monthly ended up giving The Hidden Empire a very middling score of 5.5 out of 10. From there, things only get worse. Next Generation absolutely hated the game, giving it a terrible 2 out of 5. Yeah, that's bad, but nothing compared to the official UK PlayStation magazine, which also went with a 2 out of 10. They argued that the second Star Wars title is completely useless and a major mistake on the part of LucasArts, a company with a fantastic reputation on the PC format. They're going to have to go a long way to persuade us that having the Star Wars label on the box means that we're in for a gaming treat. In the case of Rebel Assault 2 and Dark Forces, it just ain't true. By the way, just in case you're now suddenly curious, they gave Dark Forces a score of 5 out of 10. Look, Rebel Assault 2 isn't very good. Or maybe GamePro was right this whole time and it's actually a misunderstood gem. I guess you're going to have to play it for yourself to see who was right. Spoiler alert, it wasn't GamePro. With the success of games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, horror was all the rage during the 32-bit era. While those franchises used their eerie locations and unsettling atmosphere to send shivers down your spine, Sony decided to go in the complete opposite direction. Taking inspiration from The Nightmare Before Christmas, MediEvil uses its spooky setting to make you laugh. This is a lighthearted hack-and-slash action game developed by the same people that brought you the 1997 Frogger reboot. With its Halloween-themed world and creative character designs, it was a refreshing counter to the cute and cuddly mascot characters that had dominated the market up until that point. And you know what? The gamble paid off as MediEvil was a hit with consumers, spawning not only a sequel but 2 different remakes. Not bad for a bunch of bones. Well, let's see what the critics thought of Sir Daniel and his harrowing adventure. Over Electronic Gaming Monthly, they liked it, for the most part. Crispin gave the game an 8.5 out of 10, admitting that while he's a little bit fed up with the cutesy 3D action-adventure games, MediEvil packs enough puzzles, weird weapons, and for the lack of a better term, meat to its gameplay to keep you interested until the end. You get a cool mix of indoor and outdoor levels. Some stages, particularly the floating ghost ship, are damn near amazing. Dean was a little less enthusiastic, giving it a 7 out of 10. I'd classify the game as an action RPG light. Light because the battles and puzzle solving are on the easy side, as is the overall objective of the game. No doubt it's a solid package, but it's definitely geared towards a younger audience. That's fine, as long as you don't mind. While the UK edition of Play went a lot higher with a score of 86%, the real interesting story is what's happening on the other side of the scale. For example, you saw Edge give the game a so-so score of 7, which is the exact same grade that you saw over at Game Informer. Notoriously grumpy Next Generation lived up to their reputation with an even lower score, a 3 out of 5. They complain that the problem is that the whole game, while neatly packaged, is aimed strictly at platform fans. There's nothing new here in either design or gameplay, and in the end, MediEvil just doesn't have enough to push it beyond being anything more than a competent clone of what's come before. And if you think that's a low score, wait until you get a load of computer and video games. Giving the game a 2 out of 5, they compared the PlayStation hit to one of my favorite Capcom games. If you've ever played the Capcom classic Ghosts and Goblins, you'll know what MediEvil is all about in the first seconds of play. The hack and slash action and look is eerily familiar. Unfortunately, MediEvil isn't as memorable as Capcom's game. The main problem is repetition. The game doesn't really get going until the 3rd or 4th level, and by then I was a bit bored. That's not to say that MediEvil is a bad game, it's just short on genuine thrills. And that's the thing. This game is definitely not bad, but it's also not going to blow you over. The horror theme is fun, and there's a lot of potential here, but in the end, it's yet another hack and slash action game without much depth. Give it a try on PS Plus, if you dare. Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just like this one every time Sony adds classic games to their online service. We also do this with the Nintendo Switch Online. There's a whole playlist with, and I'm not even joking here, more than 100 episodes. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is the worst Star Wars game? Look, there are a lot of really good Star Wars games out there, and we're going to talk about those in May. But for now, I'm curious about the bad ones. Which one's the worst? Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with a review of that new Contra game, Freedom Planet 2, and more. While you'll wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.